Hey there, it's a Dad Who Games, and today, this kid from the 80s is going to critique and review the modern versions of the classic Transformers toys as found in the War for Cybertron trilogy, Siege, Earthrise, and Kingdom. 30 years ago, I played with the Transformers, daydreamed about seeing them come to life in the real world, was stoked and consequentially disappointed at their big screen debut because, well, where was the Volkswagen? Why was Starscream a Dorito? And were Megatron's first words really, after all that time frozen in ice, "I am Megatron"? Hi, I'm Greg, and no, we are not just going to be talking about the Transformers movies. I'm going to give an honest review of the War for Cybertron toys as a proud 80s kid, 90s teen, and millennial dad. The point I was trying to make before I was sideswiped by a murdered Jazz is that I'm one of those guys that's into the nostalgia of the modern efforts. When I was a kid, I imagined what my Transformers would be like if they had articulated arms and legs. No, I didn't know what that meant when I was a kid, but you know what I mean. The robots basically had like zero action. Usually their legs were actually fused together. And without having any joints, the old toys were effective at being immovable objects. The vehicle forms were incredible. But when I would sit down to watch a new episode of the Transformers with my Ironhide toy, I just didn't get how this toy in my hand is the same Ironhide as on the screen. But then I saw the Kingdom Wheeljack in a toy aisle at one of my local stores. And I thought, wow, it looks just like Wheeljack. But he's got movable arms and legs. And the rest is history. And I have since collected a War for Cybertron version of each of my original G1 toys that I still have. And so no, this isn't my first video sharing my collection, but this is it. Like after this video, that's it. This will be my final video showcasing my War for Cybertron Autobots. Because, well, this is my definitive review of how Hasbro has magnificently taken advantage of our nostalgia, securing lifelong customers and revenue. They knew what we wanted then as the original target audience and how to get us to come back as adults, if we ever left, all because they knew how to please us. We were kids, we liked cars, we liked trucks, then make them into robots? Of course we're gonna like it. Now, they have taken all of those original toys' shortcomings and threw them out the window. All the things we had wished our toys didn't have. You want to have movable legs? We'll give you movable legs. That kind of stuff. Like, they seriously have made my childhood dreams come true with these toys. We're going to go in toy release order as we critique robot and vehicle forms for each. Also, I'm going to be throwing up some Autobot signs to denote different versions of the vehicles. I have the traditional red for real-life cars, a Diaclone symbol on top of the traditional Autobot symbol to symbolize how what we had known as Transformers in the United States when we were kids had initially been known as Diaclone in Japan. They're completely identical toys. We have the classic shiny Autobot symbol to represent the cartoon, and the war-torn Autobot symbol for the War for Cybertron. While we go, the music that you're going to be hearing is actually my original progressive video game grunge music. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's a pretty good description. If you like what you hear, you can find me on SoundCloud. I'm a Dad Who Games there as well. And if you're new here, welcome. Perhaps I convince you to subscribe. Well, I'll try, but either way, thanks for stopping by. Let us begin. Being completely frank, Hound was one of my least favorite of my G1 toys. Of course, the vehicle form was on par with all the others, with being super detailed and realistic, and while the cartoon version did well to mimic the toy, you really had to pretend that he had legs. And his arms? They were afterthoughts with how tiny and difficult they were to transform. He was a great example of how vehicle forms most certainly came first, and the robot form was just like free DLC. But now look at him. More importantly, look at those arms! You can move them all over the place. Mostly. His big chest kind of limits how far across his arms can go. But having proportioned arms that move just makes me teary-eyed to wiggle them back and forth. The legs also succeed in giving action to the formerly actionless action figure. But the size of the feet really does matter when posing him. It's a challenge if you're wanting him to do anything other than stand in a slightly different position. Also, the feet have limited positions to lock them in for any angled movements. Either his feet are flat, or they're at like a 45-degree angle. So the articulations could be a little better. But given the size of the truck they gave him, I mean, what are you gonna do? I'm simply happy that they made equal effort in making both forms look fantastic. Gone is the little Jeep that could to make way for a Hummer-esque military brick house. It's more akin to modern military vehicles, but still has the subtle essence of the original Jeep. Hound, as we'll also see with Trailbreaker shortly, falls victim to having his robot bits being visible when in vehicle mode. See, I'm all about these being robots in disguise. The more that I can't tell that a vehicle can change into a robot, the better. For Hound, it's his arms. They just sit there, right out in the open for all to see when he's in vehicle form. Thankfully, unlike Trailbreaker, you don't really notice the arms because the extra bulkiness kind of makes sense for the kind of vehicle he is. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to miss those fists, but I don't care. They don't detract from how great a rendition this Hound is. And because this is to be a thorough critique, I have to also mention how his head really doesn't have all that much pivot because of a flat piece of plastic behind it. Combined with the limitations size puts on the legs and arms, and it's an overall challenge to get a good pose out of him. When I first got him, there were 2 steps to his transformation that really took some practice. Flipping the back of the truck around to become his legs, and securing the black, cargo-filled bed of the truck. It took several attempts before I realized that you need to have the gray upper leg portion like a 90-degree angle from the torso. You do that and the legs flip around with ease. This little black cargo thing will not stick into place if either of the legs are even the slightest bit twisted. Make sure his leg portions are completely straight. He comes with 3 accessories that can all combine to make some mega gun that he can't easily hold, but as we saw during my posing montage, it oddly works on his shoulder. There is this nice automatic shotgun styled main hand with a shoulder cannon, or it could also be a hand cannon, that completely mimics the look of the G1 shoulder cannon. So if we were to imagine a continuum marking the best and the worst of my collection, we're gonna have to place Hound right in the middle because we've got nothing to compare him to. I'll put the other Autobots on either side depending on whether or not I think that they're better or worse than Hound. And by good, I mean having an accurate remake or logical recreation of the original, but with dynamic action play and posing. But where do you think Hound will end up by the end of this video? Well, there's only one way to find out. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible with Sideswipe. As a kid, not only did I love him because he was a Lamborghini, my go-to childhood favorite car, but because I felt he looked the most like his cartoon counterpart. Now, well, he still looks like the original character, even with his vehicle form being a Cybertronian knockoff of a Lamborghini. And of course, those articulated arms and legs. So pleasing to be able to have Sideswipe be full of action, and not just be a metal brick. I would honestly give Sideswipe the moniker of best Transformer in my collection, if not for one minor miss: his weapons. The OG had a shoulder cannon and a gun. Mr. War for Cybertron does have a nice looking shoulder cannon, but it comes with a missile that also doubles as this tiny handgun. And that's it. It's pretty weak in my opinion, especially when you add in how the shoulder cannon limits his head movement because of a piece of plastic that just juts out. Now, I'm sure the actual War for Cybertron show, which I have never watched, might provide some lore as to his Cybertronian form, but I'm pretty confident that the toys had to deal with what Michael Bay dealt with in the movies: trademarks and permissions. I'm willing to bet that they didn't obtain the rights to use the Lamborghini likeness because either the cost just wasn't in the budget, or Lamborghini just said no. I don't know. But Mirage had to be called Dino because of an already existing deal Ferrari had with Mattel, so this sort of thing does happen. This is where my general disinterest in the lore comes into play. Yes, I know, I'm sorry for some of you who might be really into the stories from the shows and comics, but I really am a fan of the toys for what they are: toy versions of cartoon characters. For me, the two main requirements a Transformer must have are accuracy to the source material and the ability to move and be full of action potential. No matter how good or bad of a revitalization the War for Cybertron line is for any of the original characters, the one undeniable truth is that the ability to move the arms and legs makes all of the War for Cybertron Transformers awesome. As a result, most critiques I'll be making about these toys are really, in all honesty, completely nitpicking. These toys are a long string of knocks out of the park with some minor details that could have been better, but really doesn't take away from the overall quality of these collectibles. That's actually why I haven't been commenting on Sideswipe, as he really is a solid toy, despite the lackluster weaponry. There's no challenge to his transforming, none of his parts are fragile or seem like they will eventually snap, and he's 100% the Sideswipe I remember in an awesome modern form. So a Lamborghini he is not, by any means, but they certainly kept as close to the design as possible without stepping over the trademark border. And still, it's just as sleek and cool as Sideswipe's personality. As for my overall ranking, I think I can confidently put him ahead of Hound. Having a weak weapon isn't all that big of a deal when compared to having conspicuous hidden parts, or having a transformation or two that limits movement. Sideswipe just has that edge, with having all of Hound's strengths, but none of his weaknesses. Mirage is a fine example of being so close, but so far in overall quality. If not for the style of his robot form, he would honestly be incredibly forgettable because of the weak quality of the transforming parts. But clearly the robot form looks fantastic as it maintains canon details. He looks like Mirage, but doesn't at all at the same time. You know what I mean? Whereas Sideswipe had me yearning for better weapons, Mirage is locked and loaded with two huge guns, and thus I am very happy. The one black gun is actually interchangeable as his shoulder cannon. Alas, the gravity of the large guns doesn't help his weak leg situation, but hey, he at least has some solid weapons, am I right? However, his robot form has one problematic design: his legs. The front of the vehicle form gets tucked into the lower legs, and when they are in place, the tip of the car will stick out the bottom of his feet. It makes it so that angling his feet for various poses is a bit of a challenge. Now, to chat about my real gripe with Mirage: his ridiculous vehicle form. I know that these toys are designed for kids and all, and a race car is a race car, but the gigantic spoiler missed the mark for me. I mean, an F1 isn't all that hefty, so I would imagine trying to hide full-size arms in such a small car body would lead to having to get creative. It begs the classic question of why his Cybertronian form would still resemble an F1 car. For that matter, why would anyone become a car on Cybertron? I could see flying around for mobility, but why wheels? I think I would have been more satisfied had they strayed from the original vehicle form design the way they did for Ironhide and Ratchet. But wait, there's more. The fragile nature of the clear blue plastic used for the front portion of the car. Not only is the clear plastic weaker than solid, the bits used to connect the parts are little tabs of plastic. It didn't take many transformations to have those little blue bits become white from stress. I expect that if I'm not too careful, these bits will snap. In addition, detaching and reattaching the blue portions to the front white portion requires you to bend the weak plastic over the other piece. It's a mouthful, but being required to bend fragile plastic is not appealing to someone who prefers long-lasting toys. Also, I don't know about others, but mine has the loosest legs. I usually have to prop him up against another Transformer because his legs will swivel on their own. So he looks great, but just suffers from having skipped leg day. Believe it or not, I made an ASMR video using Mirage where I buried him in sand before cleaning him. As one would expect, a nook and cranny or two still houses some sand granules. The trade-off? His legs are actually a bit tighter and therefore stronger for posing. He still needs support, but he doesn't get all floppy when transforming or posing him now. Just this car form, like, it's just a stretch for me. So you can imagine that he's always in robot mode. So in review, War for Cybertron Mirage looks great in robot form, but can't stand well. His vehicle form is just too strange to be cool with its fragile plastic craftsmanship. I love you, Mirage, but you're most certainly at the bottom of my list. With awareness of the others we have still yet to check out, this could be my worst Transformer of my collection. But we'll just have to wait and see. Despite his tiny build, Cliffjumper is a great example of an incredible reimagination. Like the G1 before him, he was not as big as the other Autobots, and generally was pretty simple in his transformation. This Cliffjumper is about on par with the original. He's a fraction of the other robot sizes, and while he does come with some decent articulations, the diminutive size limits the amount of joints. The legs, especially with the gigantic feet-to-body ratio, really don't offer much in terms of action. Likewise could be said about his arms, as they are shorter than the size of his chest. They give him and show him on the box with a big bazooka, but he can't actually hold it like one. It becomes just a really big and awkward weapon. Yeah, I just got right into the negative with him. Don't get me wrong, he meets the standards for greatness shared by the other characters, but because he's so small, it's just not possible for him to really compete in the ranking of my favorites. I mean, I will completely include him because while he isn't all that great of an action figure, he does look fantastic and transforms into a decent vehicle form. Like I said before, you may not like one of these figures for one or another reason, but the overall modernization of giving working arms and legs solidifies it as a million times better than the original. In an effort to raise his price point though, he comes with a bunch of accessories. 2 big hairdryer handguns that can combine into one long bazooka. There's this piece that attaches to the bottom of the car that can be added to the weapons, but I honestly don't know what the purpose is. Maybe it's just to raise the back end of the car up when you add the skis. Yes, skis. I'm not sure. Maybe they use them in the show? But you get these two tiny skis that attach beneath the front wheels. When you add the guns as flanking engines, he becomes a jet-propelled snowmobile. I could honestly do without the latter two. All I need are guns, or a cool melee weapon. The other pieces are just destined to be lost at some point. Oh, I almost forgot. The back end of the car fully detaches to be used in one of two ways. Attach it to his back to complete the robot. Or put it in his hand to act as, I guess, a shield? I don't know, but it gives me breakdown spoiler vibes. I talk more about that in my Seeing Double video on the Stunticons. Be sure to check that one out too. Am I disappointed? No, not at all. This is the most accurate recreation of G1 Cliffjumper. He is the same character as the original show, but now with the ability to move. But I don't know, when I did the research on what real-life vehicles these Transformers were based on, they all felt really accurate, except for Cliffjumper. Even though his original patent says Porsche, I just can't accept that. See, in my Greg logic, Cliffjumper should be a cheaper car. Like, the bigger the robot, the higher the vehicle price tag. And with Cliffjumper being the same size as Bumblebee, he should be treated to the same tier of vehicle. But I think whatever this Cliffjumper is, works perfectly. It's not going to come as too much of a surprise, but I still prefer transforming and posing Mirage. So Cliffjumper has to go to the bottom of the list. I really like him and all, but I can't deny how he compares to the others in being half the size and with less posability. Grapple was my biggest surprise. I had seen him a bunch in stores and really didn't have high expectations. But I have the original and I had to complete my modern collection. I absolutely love how they designed his robot form. The level of articulation, because of his long limbs, is some of the best among my team. However, the biggest and most substantial problem was documented in my unboxing video of him where he broke the first time I attempted transforming him back into the robot for the first time. From comments I received, the break is a common one. These little pegs attached to the crane portion are an incredibly tight fit into the holes on the bottoms of his feet. One completely snapped off. It was really disheartening, and it left his vehicle form a little wonky, but his robot form is just too good. A really big plus are his accessories. He's got three. First, there's his classic welding attachment to maintain his architectural role with the Autobots. Then, of course, his grappling claw because, well, grapple. And then there is what I feel the absolute best weapon of all of my Transformers. This sawed-off shotgun-style gun. I'm just a sucker for the shotgun style of weapon. It's just a hard punch through the face. I mean, please. Doesn't everyone immediately make the shotgun your primary weapon in any first-person shooter? I mean, like since Wolfenstein 3D, the shotgun always is the closest you can get to God mode. Just friggin' blast away. Anyway, Grapple's epic build is perfectly accentuated with this weapon. Man, I'm talking like a wine or cigar aficionado. Or, you know, as a verbose high school English teacher. That means I'm into research too. And I did mine to figure out kind of a truck he is. Long story short, a Mitsubishi Fuso is not a singular vehicle. It's the base for a number of construction bodies. One might have a crane, the other just a simple flatbed. In Grapple's case though, only the front cab portion is actually a clear reference to the Fuso. The rest of him is an amalgamation of characteristics from all the different giant crane trucks that are out there. You might occasionally see them if they're doing highway work. Huge, with like 12 wheels, and they're ungodly gigantic. So he's that with a Mitsubishi Fuso front. But a grappling attachment for these trucks is for removing rubbish. Yeah, here I thought he was a crane raising architectural masterpieces, when really his truck is just there to pick up the pieces. I still think they did pretty well at making a mega crane out of a compact truck. I was actually tempted to place Grapple ahead of Sideswipe, but the simple fact is that Grapple's vehicle mode just doesn't feel whole, save for the cab. The truck really is a Frankenstein of construction vehicles, whereas the sleek Cybertronian Lamborghini most certainly is more appealing than the truck. And, you know, come to think of it, I think I'd still take Hound over Grapple. Yeah, he's a bit lacking in the posability department, but the level of detail given to what his vehicle form looks like really just outshines the flat orange of Grapple. Okay, I hope this isn't a spoiler, but right out of the gate, I think we might have the best Transformer in my collection. I mean, I'm making a point of ranking these toys as I write this script. I know what the other Transformers are, but I haven't given them the thoughtful time I have given to the few that you've seen so far. Still, I think I need to explain why there's really no contest between him and them. First off, this robot mode is the most versatile in its articulations, especially in his legs. You can put him in all kinds of cool action positions. While his arms aren't as exciting as his legs, they still have the full range of motion. Then we have the color scheme from the TV show, and not the all-silver Nissan Fairlady we got as a toy. Not only was that toy all silver with no black hood like he was in the cartoon, the image on the box was the blue Streak, the Diaclone predecessor. They just simply didn't change the graphic on the box for US release. But Blue's Silver Streak, as they call him now, wasn't the design we watched each week. With this War for Cybertron iteration, we finally have a proper US Blue Streak. His car mode originally, as I mentioned, was a Nissan Fairlady Z, the same car that was previously known as a Datsun, before Nissan bought it. Because, in all honesty, the Z doesn't have any obnoxious extras, it's a pretty basic design that clearly didn't require any trademark shenanigans. I mean, this car looks like a Datsun, but doesn't at the same time. That seems to be the theme with all of these toys. They look exactly like what you would expect and want, but at the same time they look completely different. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's got me hooked. There isn't anything to say about his transformation. He works perfectly. In fact, it's essentially the exact same transformation as the original toy. The only difference? His arms are bigger, so they take up more underside space, and the legs come apart. So they just modernized the already awesome design and gave him a coat of black paint. Well, alrighty then. His accessories match the classic counterpart. Well, I mean, the same weapons. His dual arm cannons don't shoot missiles like the OG, and in fact are pretty darn small by comparison. But that's how they were in the cartoon, so I appreciate that nod to accuracy. I have only positives to say about this version of Blue Streak. He's everything I could have dreamed of as a child. The rest of my Transformers are really going to have to take things to the next level if they want to surpass Blue Streak. Of all my G1 Transformers, Trailbreaker's robot form was in the most need of an overhaul. Aside from his vehicle form, I had no connection between the toy and the character in the cartoon. I mean, you really needed to squint, raise your arm, and stand on one foot to have the old toy look like Trailbreaker. His head being the most prominent double-take moment that I am certain any young child of the time likewise experienced. He felt like a knockoff from some supermarket toy nook you give to your kids to shut them up action figure. To be clear, he was a cool toy. It just wasn't the real Trailbreaker to me. Like, he was Trailbreaker's brother. But anyway, on top of the aesthetic of the toy, it really didn't transform securely. The head just flopped around, as did pretty much all of his torso parts. Bottom line, he was always in his cool truck form. These childhood gripes have been more than addressed with Trailbreaker's War for Cybertron upcycle. I mean, first and foremost, there is no mistaking this face. It's Trailbreaker. His head is securely attached and his torso also has multiple pop-locking parts to assure he stays transformed. The original also came with a buttload of accessories to lose. Here, he only has one, as two are permanently attached to and able to be hidden under his back. But, well, like with Cliffjumper, that just sounds silly to me. The only losable is the poker. I don't know. I thought he shot missiles, but maybe he had some sort of welding tool like Grapple? They call it a blaster, but I don't know. I guess it's a blaster. Anyway, there was another detail about the original that I had hoped to have seen addressed. His giant red leg warmers. I mean, yes, I know, this is actually pretty accurate to the cartoon, but no. No. You can plainly see them sticking out from the bottom of his truck mode. Like, they ran out of room when designing the toy and just shrugged it off. If the cartoon Trailbreaker looked like the original toy, then I would have no issue. But I mean, the immersion. The robot form has to be hidden. Well, the red leg warmers are still visible, if not even more visible on the underside of the truck. What's worse is that his arms are now right out there as well. The gray arms kind of give a feeling of being the front wheel suspension, but his fists are certainly on display for an immersion-breaking wink. I see your legs there, Mr. Breaker. How dumb do you think us humans are? But I think the improvements done to his robot form really win out over the issues with convincing me that he's just a truck, and not a robot in disguise. How well everything locks into place is a complete game changer. There's a place for everything to be secured, and despite my animosity to his arbitrarily colored legs, they do have the patented action that has been the most significant change since G1. This Trailbreaker, as well as all the others, is an actual action figure. Who would have thought? Man, his underside is so bad. So it is with all of these factors considered that I have to put him at the bottom. He's much more solid than Mirage or Cliffjumper, but he kind of lacks in all the other departments that the others really excel at. As a kid, my love for Lamborghinis could not persuade me to have much affection for Sunstreaker. I mean, his toy was actually pretty decent, but everything was loose and wouldn't stay still. Also, this black piece that covers up his arms on the underside never closed completely. Well, suffice it to say that Sunstreaker suffered from the usual docket of shortcomings. Granted, the War for Cybertron Sunstreaker is kind of his own robot, as he only loosely resembles the cartoon version, but he's still more akin to it than G1. I just don't get the mini shoulder tower things. What are they? I was hesitant when I ordered him because from looking at images, I had expected him to simply be a recolor of Wheeljack. To my surprise, only his head and upper leg transformations are the same between the two. Sunstreaker adds many more unique transformations to the table. He looks extremely simple at a glance, but as you transform him, you realize that there's a lot more than meets the eye with this one. He's one of the least bulky in his build, and this leads to being able to fully take advantage of his articulations. I personally am a huge fan of that because he doesn't come with any accessories. Okay, no, he does. The engine top that goes on his back. I can see that it is kind of similar to the OG incarnations, but it just feels out of place. This piece can also act as a 6-barreled blaster, but, well, like Trailbreaker's cover being used as a shield, it just sounds silly. I don't really mind because I like to think of Sideswipe as a melee transformer as well, so, I mean, they're brothers, it makes sense. It's like a Cybertronian Double Dragon remake. It pains me to also say that this vehicle form leaves me wanting a spoiler. I mean, he looks great, and honestly, more like a Lamborghini than Sideswipe, while still not looking at me. Yeah, you know what I'm gonna say. That's definitely the theme we've got here. But whenever I have thought of Sunstreaker, I call to mind the strange image of a Lamborghini with an oversized engine and spoiler. These details aren't deal breakers or anything because this Sunstreaker is simply an alternate design. Nothing that is different with this toy detracts from it being a solid recreation of the best of the yellow Autobots. Yeah, I said it. He'll get his time soon too. So I really tried to find a Lamborghini with an oversized engine and giant spoiler, but surprise, surprise, Sunstreaker is not 100% a Lamborghini. I really don't know why it was there in the first place. Maybe initially they didn't want the car forms to be 100% identical to the real-life inspiration. Like how in comic books, all superheroes are drawn to be about a foot taller than any non-superhero. Kinda sounds logical and all, but then you've got the traditional Countach and Sideswipe, and he doesn't have a giant engine. That's why I ended up being a fan of his revitalization. Yeah, he still has an oversized engine, but it feels a little more proportioned. But I'll never understand Hasbro's challenge with spoilers. They don't seem all that difficult to implement. The question I'm pondering, though, is Sideswipe or Sunstreaker? Who do I like more? Streaker immediately jumps up to the front because the only drawback is his weapon. Everything else is pretty fantastic. But that's the same story with Sideswipe. You know, I think I'm going to have to say that I prefer Sunstreaker to Sideswipe, and it's only for one reason. Sideswipe's chest is considerably wider than Sunstreaker. So, of the two of them, it's easier to pose Sunstreaker. Otherwise, they're both awesome toys. However, he might be Sunstreaker, but he's no Blue Streak. Before the Michael Bay foray with the Transformers Big Picture IP, the little yellow mini-bot that you could snag along with Cliffjumper for under $5. I never cared much for him, but then overnight he was the star. He's been fleshed out much since his miniature debut, and there are so many versions of the Camaro now that it's hard to find something akin to the original. But then I found this one. He mirrors the size of the original and returns him to his place as a part of an ensemble cast and away from the solo gig. I should note though that this is not a War for Cybertron Kingdom toy. I only put him in that category because I only had 2 characters from the final part of the series. This one was in the white Netflix box. And yes, the fact that my Earthrise members of my collection outnumber Siege and Kingdom peeves me. I would love to get more, but well, real life comes first. When it all comes down to it though, this Bumblebee is absolutely identical to the Earthrise Cliffjumper. I mean, they have unique vehicle form styles, but that much had been true with the originals. They are essentially twins. Bumblebee comes with identical accessories and everything about his transformation, as well as all of the shortcomings, are identical to Cliffjumper. I do have to call attention to the highlight of this Bumblebee. He's a beetle. That's it. He will always be a beetle because it just makes sense that a robot named for a bug should be a car named for a bug. Just saying. That's why, if I were to be asked which Transformers movie I like the most, I would have to say the Bumblebee movie. It was completely unrelated to the others, thankfully, and everything about it was entertaining and with the classic G1 Transformers in mind. The usage of a Volkswagen Beetle made the movie work. If he had been the Camaro, it would just have been a reboot of the other movies. I don't know. But suffice it to say that I was disappointed when a Camaro drove off into the sunset next to the classic G1 Optimus Prime. Friggin' tease. I'm not even gonna touch Rise of the Beasts, a mega battle of beasts with only 4 beasts. That didn't seem to be much of a rise. But I haven't seen it, probably won't, and that's just the impression that I get. I never really intended to get Bumblebee. He's like so cliche anymore. My only main reason for grabbing this form of him was because I found Cliffjumper first. I thought he was a fantastic recreation of the original toy, so I figured, since Bumblebee was identical, that he would be just as impressive. But seeing Bee as a Camaro was such a shot to the heart. Here they are with the ability to make cars turn into giant, realistic robots, and legal terms tarnish the childhood memory. I'm glad I separated the cartoon and the movies as being individual interpretations, because you really can't enjoy the movies if you're holding too tightly onto their originals. I'm not one for having ties. So, because of the beetle factor, Bumblebee edges out Cliffjumper. I like them the same, but the nostalgia from Bee just wins out. Wheeljack. I think everyone loves Wheeljack. It doesn't matter what form he comes in. He's always the lovable nerd. He was the first of my War for Cybertron collection because I couldn't get over how awesome he looked. Like all the other toys in the series, his Cybertronian vehicle mode does not detract from having his robot form look right out of the cartoon. I mean, okay, it's not 100%, but this was a grand introduction to the toy line. While half of his transformation is identical to Sunstreaker, the same cannot be said for posability. That's no shade to Wheeljack because you really can get him in many stances, but his legs are just slightly wider than those of Sunstreaker, leaving positioning them a bit of a challenge. Otherwise, the toy himself is solid, like no complaints. Well, almost. His head is super loose, so you need to mess around with balancing it upright, lest it sink chin to chest, as if you've somehow offended him by ridiculing one of his inventions. And even the OG Transformer, the first face we saw all those years ago when the cartoon debuted, has fallen victim to weapon envy. While having the attached spoiler transform into his little wings instead of having them be losable parts as they were in the original was a great reworking of his accessories, his tiny blaster is a weak replacement for 2 shoulder cannons. I mean, the blaster itself looks like the former cannon, so why not throw another one in the box? Yeah, it'd be similar to Blue Streak, but come on, the more firepower the better, am I right? So I've brought up comparisons to the movies a bunch throughout this video, and well, I can't think of Wheeljack without thinking of Q from Dark of the Moon. This is Wheeljack, but they called him Q to give a nod to James Bond's tech guru. But why not call him Wheeljack in the first place? I cite again how Mirage was called Dino because something to do with Ferrari having a deal with Mattel. Naming him Mirage in the movie would have broken the contract or something like that. Maybe the same thing happened for this beast. Look at him! Those eyes! That hair! WTF am I looking at? How, or more importantly, why, does a Transformer have hair? And now with this can of worms opened, what about Hound and his huge gut and bearded face? Or even better, Crosshairs, whose car form turns into a cloak that can flow in the wind. What? Next thing you know, they'll make Wheeljack a Volkswagen. I've already distanced myself between the OGs and the Bayverse, but with these odd additions, it's just completely severed. They have absolutely nothing in common as far as I'm concerned. And while I'm sure my collection will have more of the movie studio series characters, I highly doubt I'll end up seeing another Transformers movie. I appreciate them, but well, they just sting with too much nostalgia-fueled cuts. Simple but effective, Wheeljack is a solid member of my collection. Alas, that simplicity keeps him from the top of my ranking effort. You know what? Wheeljack is like the most vanilla of these Transformers. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about the toy. But it's Wheeljack through and through. I think he's gonna have to go between Trailbreaker and Grapple. I was tempted to have Mr. Jack overtake Grapple as well, but the Crane's incredible robot mode is just too good to ignore. Blaster was the biggest surprise out of all of my collection. I always thought of him as one of the cheesiest Autobots with tape deck envy towards Soundwave. His toy was ridiculously huge and had zero action. Thinking of the G1 toy makes me think of the scene from Tom Hanks' movie Big, where he's criticizing the company's desire to manufacture skyscrapers that transform into robots. Who wants to play with a building, I believe he said. Well, the old Blaster was like one of those buildings. But holy crap, the War for Cybertron Blaster is insanely cool. Blaster's old form was wimpy by comparison. But this new form actually feels intimidating. Like, yes, I am a big boombox. You going to tell me something about it? He says as he leans down to look at you eye to eye. I actually think he could put up a fight against Soundwave now. If there's one thing to be said about Voyager-class Transformers, it's that bigger size means bigger and more joints for extremely versatile posing. He does suffer a little with the same foot problem as Hound, where the positions are severely limited, but the rest of him is insanely good. He's mostly solid plastic and there are no breakable parts or weak points that you need to watch out for. Anything negative about Blaster is solely related to the eject afterthought. See, Blaster comes with this tiny transforming cassette tape, as he did previously. However, it's just a cheap plastic doohickey you'd be able to find at a dollar store in the party favor section. I know he's just a little bonus to the main attraction of Blaster, but nonetheless, I could do without him. What's more a peeve is that Blaster's right hand is permanently with the pointer finger extended as if he's pressing a button on his chest. You can't really notice it if you have his gun in that hand, but still, it's a little silly. But completely worth it if you're into role-playing with your collection. Blaster's also a pleasure to transform. Each of his transformations fit perfectly and solidly. This guy can take a beating. So if you were to purchase a modern Transformer for a little kid, I would highly suggest Blaster. He's super resilient. Also, until I acquired Motormaster, I never had a Transformer with as many hidey holes for concealing his robot form. Lots of hinges and folds to remove the boombox shell. So much fun and satisfying to transform. Here I am going on and on about Blaster, and I'm realizing something. Aside from eject, there really isn't anything negative to say about the boombox. I mean, he checks all of my boxes, as he perfectly updates an originally weak design. I guess I'm more met by a conundrum. Who's my best Transformer, Blaster or Bluestreak? They both are incredible updates to the classic characters, and I'll be honest, since I personally like Bluestreak over Blaster, I'm tempted to let Mr. Streak maintain the top of the list. However, because Blaster is a Voyager class, he is also larger and more solid. So when it all comes down to it, Bluestreak is more likely to break years from now after multiple transformings. For Blaster, aside from slamming him onto concrete, I think he's going to stand the test of time. Like all of the updates to these Transformers, all of their original shortcomings have been mostly removed. The real question will be if Blaster's tape deck still works in 30 years. That'll be the true test of improvement over the original would-be boombox. So, indeed, Blaster finds his way at the top of my list. He's simply outstanding. Super solid, nicely updated in design, and of course, fully articulated to satiate the appetite of all of us who just simply love to pose them. I hope you've enjoyed my little foray reviewing my collection. I simply just like recording my toys. But seriously, I'll move on from my War for Cybertron collection, I promise. I do have some other Transformers, but, well, actually, if you're still here with me, I'm going to take a moment to genuinely thank you for watching. It means so much to me, even with my now sporadic nature to content creating. The last couple years have been a really heavy toll on my mental health. Making videos, playing with my Transformers, it's all therapy to me. It means the world to me that you enjoy it. And man, if I could do this for a living, that would be sick. I love making these videos. And with enough support, I'd be able to take them to the next level. Well, maybe one day. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And until the next, have a day.